You heard from the head of the gun crime team in Peel Regional Police. It's the worst ever. We have more
It is
gun
the worst
control
ever.
than ever, but it's the worst gun crime than ever. How do you square those things?
Yeah, it is worse than ever. You know, what's interesting is if you look at back in 2014, which we were sort of ending, I believe it was around 9 years. You can correct me on that of Conservative Party rule under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. In 2014, firearm-related violence was at the lowest point it had ever been in the history of statistics on those on firearm-related crime for
Really?
StatsCan. And then here we are sitting somewhere around 2023, I believe the numbers are in, and we are at the highest point of firearm-related violence in the history of data collection of that kind of information at StatsCan after Bill C-17, or sorry, 71, handgun ban, massive gun ban on May 1st, 2020, Bill C-21, Bill C-21 amendments, and now this latest ban. And it's amazing though. It's almost like the more handgun and long gun bans that the government introduces and the more gun control they introduce, the more dangerous Canadians get. It's almost like they're aimed at the wrong target.
Huh. Well, it's obviously doing nothing to tamp down illegal crime. What is the reason behind the surge in crime? Like those numbers are astonishing. I understand that for the first time ever, you talk about going from a record low to a record high, that Canada is now on par with the United States for crime other than murder. And that is so astonishing. My entire life, one of the snobby things that Canadians said is, well, we're different from Americans. We've got the best healthcare system in the world, and we don't have their gun crime. Well, unfortunately, I don't think either of those two things are true anymore. What is the reason that gun crime has soared? Obviously, gun control does nothing against gun crime, but why has it gone so much higher?
Well, I think you can figure out where the gun crime is coming from if you just locate the people that are committing those crimes, right? And the police know full well that the overwhelming majority of this crime is to do with the drug trade, to do with gang activity. It's also a result of many social ills that we see increasing in our society. I mean, I was born in Canada. I've been alive here 55 years. You know, you may not be as old as I am, but I think all of us that have been around a while have seen the difference in the disintegration of the social fabric of Canada. So anyway, that comes from social moral decline, unemployment, lack of opportunity, lack of hope. You have some difficult communities. You also have uncontrolled immigration. There's a lot of different things that end up funneling into the overall levels of violence that you see in your society. And I think the most important point to remember is those are all very difficult problems to solve. Those take a lot of resolve. They take a lot of honesty. You have to look at things in a very honest and stark way. You have to address the root causes of violence. And so those things are difficult, and they take more than 4 years, which is a typical election cycle. So that's why you don't see them being tackled by the Liberal NDP Bloc Québécois government. You see them doing things like declaring gun bans, which haven't made a difference whatsoever in the gun crime that we're seeing.
You know, as you were talking, I was jotting down my hypothesis. I mean, you mentioned a few things. I got a couple more. You mentioned immigration. I think that is a factor. People who have brought a lawlessness or a low trust society approach to Canada, foreign gangs included. The move to defund police. It's a real thing in Canada, not as pronounced as it was in the States. The new move to bail criminals, including repeat criminals. Catch and release would be a plain way of saying that. Ending Harper's mandatory minimum sentences, which were not only a deterrent on crime, but literally kept prisoners in jail so they could commit no more crime on the street. And finally, Donald Trump might point out that the border is an issue. I mean, we heard that top cop. If 90% of the guns are coming across the border, maybe Trump's onto something. Maybe we should firm up the border and stop the trafficking of criminals and drugs. I mean, I guess that would be the fifth thing that you mentioned, is when you have the amount of hard drugs on the streets that we do in Canada, The people who deal those drugs often have guns to protect their ill-gotten gains, and maybe people who use drugs perhaps have guns for the same reason. Those are 6 reasons that crime is high. None of them have anything to do with law-abiding Canadian gun owners, not one.
Well, if that was true, if what the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois and the NDP say is true, meaning that gun bans exclusively aimed at licensed gun owners who are members of gun clubs, who buy their firearms legally, who are, maintain a license, all that stuff, if that's where the crime was coming from, it would be absolutely a walk in the park to show that. We wouldn't need the rhetorical battle that we see over gun debate in Canada. No, you're lying. No, you're lying. Yeah. Well, I've got a doctor's coat on, so that means I can say untrue things and you're just terrible. Like, you wouldn't need any of these tactics. You would be able to say, well, look, here they are. These are the gun clubs where these people are centered around. We're going to shut these clubs down and we're going to seize all these people. Like, it would be game over, but it's not. It's systemic issues. Some of them being spawned by legislation like the Liberals' Bill C-5 and Bill C-75 that created the situations like you just mentioned, that police have been pleading with the government to leave. They literally have been, Ezra, they've been pleading with government to leave licensed gun owners alone, like directly. And at the same time saying, Liberals, you've created this mess with these 2 pieces of legislation. You have to stop. You have to turn this around. And they ignore them. And there's a reason for all that. But yeah, that's the situation we're in right now.
I think you're really onto something when you say tackling crime is a tough, complex, long-term thing. Banning guns is a press release that they could thump their chest and feel tough. But I think there's also the political layer here. Who are the law-abiding gun owners in Canada? Farmers and ranchers in rural parts? Well, they're not Liberal voters. There are some sports shooters. I'm guessing if you're into shooting sports, you're probably going to be more conservative leaning. I'm not stereotyping. I just think that's probably likely. There's not a lot of home defense allowed in Canada, but that would be another reason to have a lawful firearm. Every group that I just listed is more likely to vote conservative than Liberal. So Trudeau's got a win-win. He can demonize them as the problem, thus misdirecting from his own problem, and put the Conservatives in a pickle because they're going to defend farmers and ranchers and rural people and sports shooters, but they'll look like they're actually defending gun crime because they're defending guns. I think it's one of Trudeau's go-to points. He talks about abortion. He talks about guns. And those are really his go-tos when things are rough, and things have never been rougher for Trudeau. I think I just wonder if it's working. I think Trudeau does it because he thinks it works. Rod, is it working this time?
Well, I don't think it is. I don't think it's working, as a lot of their tactics aren't working anymore. And I think, like I've said, I've had to do a lot of interviews over the last week, as you can well imagine, because this ban was devastating to a lot of people. And I've been calling it an incredibly cynical and malevolent action. And there's evidence, there's direct evidence to show how malevolent this is. So the Liberals had rolled out their latest gun bill was Bill C-21. And then when Bill C-21 was going through the House committee, the Liberals came with 100 amendments to their own bill. Okay, so that doesn't happen very often, because usually you make a bill and you don't have to amend anything, right? Because it was your bill. So they come with these amendments, and one of them was called G46, and it was a list of 300 and some odd models of firearms that they wanted to add through legislation into this bill to be prohibited. And of course, there was hunting rifles in there. There was single shot, 100-year-old rifle. There's all kinds of crazy things, 22s, all kinds of stuff in there. And there was a big backlash. And after a lot of fighting, they withdrew that amendment. Okay, they withdrew it. Then after that,
backlash from who? I mean, the firearms community. But like I said, Liberals don't care about that. Were there some rural Liberals? There are a few who complain. I think. Why would Trudeau care about backlash?
Well, because the thing is, like, gun control is this smash the glass and pull out gun control when you're in trouble, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing as abortion. They tried to create an abortion debate when abortion was settled decades ago, and nobody's ever going to take abortions off the table in Canada. And so that's always been their That's always been their go-to. And, you know, the backlash was because there are groups like ours and others out there that are pushing this conversation into the mainstream, because I think that if Canadians are curious enough, they're like, well, wait a minute, we've had more, and this was a Liberal tagline, we've had more gun control than in a generation. The Liberals say that, and that's true. They've rolled out so much gun control, it makes the early 90s look like nothing, right? And at the same time, Canadians, they can't all be asleep. They're sitting there going, it's never been more dangerous to live in Canada. So there's a couple of issues that they can't reconcile. Now you have a little push from some honest media outlets. You have alternative media outlets. You have gun groups. You have wildlife federations, right? You have all these people pushing all this material out. And then people start to take notice. So they finally withdrew those amendments. And then after that, for 2 years, Ezra, they didn't do anything, right? I'd even heard some Liberal MPs saying, we're done with gun control. We pushed it too far. They did nothing. Now, all of a sudden, they come back with this vengeance. And they are like, okay, well, everything that we told you guys, because they remember, I don't know if you remember, when they were banning all these guns, they said, don't worry, gun owners, you conspiracy theorists. There's 18,000 models of firearms still available for you to continue on your life like this never happened. And so people went out and they spent thousands upon thousands of dollars, in my case, $9,000, replacing all of these firearms with firearms I could use for the same purposes. Then they come out after 2 years and they're like, yeah, all those that we told you to buy, they're banned too. Can't even take them out of the house. Don't worry, there's a gun buyback coming. We promised that half a decade ago. Why now?
Well, yeah.
Because, because the Liberals also know they have no time to collect these guns.
Right.
There's going to be an election within 10 months at the latest. They'll never get these guns. And they know that the Conservatives have vowed to roll all of this back. They know that this will never even happen even after they lose the next election. So why would they do that? They're doing that because they're like a wounded animal. They're so desperate for a bump in the polls. They're willing to try anything. And devastating. Family businesses across the country, causing people like myself to lose $9,000. They're like, yeah, go buy more guns. Yeah, you bought them? Good. Just joking. Those are banned too. They think that's funny. And causing gun clubs to be on the edge of closing. These are generational groups. These clubs have been around for some of them 100 years. Why would they do all this devastating, terrible damage and leave firearm-related criminals alone? For a bump in the polls. That's why it's so malevolent and so cynical.